Hi, I'm Rich Strolis. I'm from Connecticut, Simsbury, Connecticut. I guess the easiest way for me to explain what I do is I'm a streamer addict, but I'm a fly designer for the Montana Fly Company. When I'm not tying and designing flies and chasing my two kids around, I got a 17-year career in law enforcement. A lot of people don't know that. I've got 3 years left and I'm going to be done with that and pretty much pursue all my fishing endeavors. I started fishing, when I was 5 years old. My grandmother, actually, God rest her soul, my grandmother Josephine, she used to take me as a kid. I grew up in the foothills of the Berkshire Mountains in Massachusetts in a small town called Russell that most people probably would never even know. And she used to take me down to a couple of small streams for small brook trout. And I grew up dunking worms and throwing spinners and neps and things like that. And then just kind of took it from there. Most people kind of know me for commercial tying. That's kind of what I do as a side gig. I say side gig. On a bad year, 10,000 to, on a good year, 20,000 flies. How did I get involved in fly fishing? Well, it started early. As I told you, my grandmother got me into fishing. And then when I saw my father's fly rod, I always inquired about that up on the walls in his shop for, numerous years. And then finally, somewhere around my 10th or 11th birthday, I have a very generous aunt, my mother's sister. She's always she spoiled me as a kid. So she decided she was going to get me a fly rod. And she got me a fly rod outfit. It was an old Cortland deal, you know, those like $100 type deals. Comes with a line, comes with a reel. And my father showed me how to cast, I say showed me how to cast, like 10 minutes in the backyard and, 10 to 2, work on your loops and then go from there. And then I just hit the ground running. My first fish, and I talk about this a lot, I'll never forget it. My first trout caught on a fly was on a muddler, and the rest was history. Go figure, catch it on a streamer. And then that was it. I mean, every day after school, when I wasn't playing sports, I'd be picking that rod up and I'd be going down to the pond or to the brooks, or I'd hit the Westfield River, which was near me. That was kind of my home river growing up as a kid, and that's it. I mean, it immersed all my time. So how did I first learn about big streamers? That's a good question. It might have been from an article in one of the major magazines. I read a lot. It could have been there. It definitely, Kelly's first book, Modern Streamers for Trophy Trout, had something to do with it. I can't really put my finger on exactly when that defining moment was, but it had something to do with one of those publications. I'd always fished streamers as a kid. It's kind of the first thing I did, and then it kind of, you had that natural progression towards fishing dry flies and getting into nymphs and all that stuff, but I always seemed to rebound back to streamers. The big stuff, it had to have been from one of those publications. I couldn't quite tell you. And then probably that second year that I started guiding, I went to one of the fly fishing shows for the first time, and that's where I met Kelly. And it was like the last year, I think, that he actually did a show. And it was really cool, like putting 2 and 2 together. You're like, wow, I read about, the articulated fat or the Zoo Kruger or the Heifer Groomer, whatever the name of it was at the time. This TNA bunker and these flies, and we fish them on our rivers, and we've done really well with it. And really had a lot of interest in it, because as a kid, I used to fish a lot of rapalas and things like that. And those are kind of like what some of these flies had emulated. And, walking down the aisles in Somerset, New Jersey, and boom, there's Kelly Galloup. And I'm like, oh, cool, man. That's like, didn't expect to see that guy there. So I walk up to his booth just like any kid would. And I say kid, I'm in my 20s at the time, not expecting nothing. I can't even remember exactly how the conversation started, but I remember it saying, hey, I really fish a lot of your flies on our river. And, we got to talking. And, it's when you put 2 like-minded people together that are interested in the same thing, it's kind of crazy where the conversations can go. And I think that kind of pushed it even more. And then my time was really starting to get up to par with that stuff, and that's when I started tinkering with it more too. So probably have to say that was the defining moment, more or less. Meeting him kind of solidified everything, and then talking to him, and he really, just one conversation for a half an hour really started making me rethink and think about a lot of the flies that I'd been fishing at the time that I was interested in, and that kind of went from there. No, it's just knowing that there's that chance that fish of a lifetime's out there, and I might have the opportunity to catch it in the way that I enjoy to catch them. I mean, it's going to hit on the streamer game. I mean, the streamer game, you're looking for, it's hunting to me. I mean, I talk about this with friends and like, because some people just can't wrap their head around it. Like, why would you want to go out there fishing these heavy lines, these bigger flies, to maybe only catch a few fish? Because there are some days and that's it. Some days you may not get anything, you know, but what haunts me is those few times when I've been fishing in that manner and I've seen that just pure predaceous and it's just pure animalistic side of a very large fish that presents itself. And I don't necessarily catch that fish, but I've caught a glimpse of it that haunts you. I mean, I still have vivid nightmares, I guess you could call them, or memories of the fish that I didn't catch, or the one that maybe got away. So stuff like that haunts me. I mean, and it can happen anywhere. I mean, I could probably sit here for hours talking about fish stories, but fish like that are why I do what I do, and I will never lose that drive. And it's not just about me fishing. I could be with a customer, it'd be one of my friends. Just the fact that I get to see something like that is what keeps me always going. And that will never get old for me. All right, number one tip for streamer fishing. I could probably give you a pile, but the biggest thing, and I'm gonna use this for the people that are kind of just getting into it, that give up easy. I'll never forget one of the guides I used to work with, when we'd break out streamer rods and start streamer fishing, he'd be like, oh, what are you giving up? And I used to look at him all puzzled, like, what do you mean by giving up? You know, well, you must be giving up because you're not catching them any other way. So that kind of parlays into what my number one tip would be is you gotta start thinking like a fish and don't give up. Sometimes it's a game, you're working. So you gotta cover as much water as you possibly can, and you gotta be willing to switch things up. And it's not just switching flies. It's not just your retrieve. You gotta be able to cover a lot of different levels of the water column until the fish respond and they let you know how they want it and what's gonna work. But it's a persistence thing, you know? I mean, it's one of those things where it catches on with some people, and other people, they want the instant gratification, but you gotta stay consistent with it. And the longer you stay at it, the success will come. So I think the biggest thing, the number one tip from me, would probably be just persistence, you know? Don't give up so easy, you know, and start thinking, you know, well, all right, I caught this fish here, what kind of water was that fish in, you know? Was it in a drop-off? Was it in a color change, you know? Always be thinking, you know, and never expect what worked yesterday to work tomorrow, but be persistent. That's probably the number one tip I could give you, you know, because if you don't, you're gonna give up easy and you're not gonna be fishing streamers for much longer. What's my favorite streamer? Whatever's on the end of my line. No, you know, I've been asked this question a bunch of times, and it always had to break it down to two because I'm one of the guys that fishes a lot of different lines. I like some of the rivers I fish, I don't always get the opportunity to fish out of a boat. I do a lot of wade fishing, streamer fishing, just based on the nature of the size and the topography of the rivers that I have in my neck of the woods. So it used to be a two-part question. You know, I have some flies that I like that are weighted and some that aren't. But to be quite honest with you, if you put a gun to my head and said I only have one fly to fish with, the one that I have the most confidence in, and it's one of mine, is the Headbanger. I mean, the Headbanger Sculpin for me, I always feel when I put that on, I have confidence that I can catch fish on it, regardless of the conditions. It's caught so many big fish for me over the years, but you know, it's that question to me, what's my favorite streamer, what's the only streamer, is kind of tough because if you're a real streamer fisherman, and you fish it hard like a lot of the people out there that are into it, you know, any given day, any one of those flies can work. So, but you always have your confidence pattern. So I have to lean heavily towards that. My close second, geez, I don't even know if I got a close second, but they all kind of rotate in and out, you know. The ice pick's a good one, but man, we had some good fish on the Avengers here today. So it's tough, man. It's an evolving question. You could probably ask me the same question in 5 years and it might change again. So that gives you any kind of answer to that. All right, the first fly I tied, to be honest with you, it was out of that book that I explained to you from that tying kit. It was, and I can't tell you which one it was exactly first, but it was either a zug bug or a hare's ear, to be quite honest with you. Those are probably the first two flies that I ever tied, and they were pretty rudimentary. They came out okay. They were maybe fishable. but what I learned pretty quick was try and do multiples of those to see if you can get them to look the same. Is what I learned in that book. I'm sure shortly after I was tying muddlers too, because it's what I like to fish the most, but at that time of the game. But it was probably a hair's ear, you know? So what's my favorite tying material? Well, we're talking streamers. So for me, it's Arctic foxtail. I couldn't live without it. That's probably my favorite material to play around with, just because it's got a lot of properties that you can't get when you combine. You'd have to combine other materials. So, you know, a lot of guys like bucktail. Bucktail's got some rigidity to it, but it's also kind of soft if you use the right bucktail. Rabbit strips have breathe in the water. So take those two materials. Granted, you can't get Arctic fox hair as long as you can get bucktail, but you can get it pretty long if you really look for it. You combine those two characteristics of rabbit fur and bucktail and put those together, and that's kind of, you got the love child of Arctic fox, in my opinion. And Arctic fox is just, I don't know, you'll see, I'm kind of the guy that's known for Arctic fox and his streamers. I love this stuff, and it has some limitations, but there's ways around it. It's very durable. It breathes, it undulates, but it holds its shape too, and how you tie it. And it's easy to dye. You can dye it in a bunch of different colors, or you can buy it that way. I love that stuff. If you took that away from my tying repertoire, I would probably be very, very hurt, because I don't think I can live without that material. And I'm always thinking of new ways to use it. Hands down, Arctic fox. And not the body fur, the tail fur would probably be my #1 material. Where do I see the future of streamer fishing going? Man, there's a lot of avenues that I could answer. I think you're gonna start to see, and we've already kind of seen it, as more different ways to incorporate and build movement into flies to achieve different types of actions. I think from a materials perspective, every year there's something that's fresh. There's always a lot of things that get rebranded that have already been out there that we're seeing a lot of, but there's always something new that comes out. And I think some of these companies now have the ability to make materials that solve riddles for us tyers to achieve specific actions in flies. If you talk to a lot of fly tyers and people who design flies for this type of game, a lot of it comes down to trying to achieve a specific action in a fly. So I'm trying to get that fly to act a certain way in the water. Whether you take like a musky fly, you want it to, like a T-bone, go sideways in freight train. In order for you to do that and speed that head up and get the tail to stop, you need to build some mass or have something in the front of that fly that when you do that, it's going to turn that fly sideways. So I think you're going to see more and more materials come out that are going to allow you to change the actions of flies based on how they're tied into it. We've seen a lot of that in the last 5 to 6 years. So it's less engineering the pattern, which makes it easier for the tyer, because prior to a lot of these materials, you had to cleverly think of how you're going to build that action into a fly through the materials that you have, as opposed to, hey, I just add this one part like a fish mask to a front of a fly now, and now I can get a fly to go sideways. Yeah, I think you're going to see more of that. I don't think the push to go bigger and bigger is there. I think we've kind of already surpassed that. Most of the good guys that fish know there's certain windows of size. So I think that thing's kind of run its course. There's always going to be big flies for some of the predator stuff, but I really think we've borrowed a lot from the conventional tackle world. And you look at a lot of the lures that come out every year. I mean, that's a much larger market than the fly market, folks. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. There's a lot of things that we're gathering from there, and I think material-wise, there's companies out there that are making things now, and they have the ability to engineer stuff that's going to completely revolutionize it and change the way some of these flies act. And I kind of see how that's going to go. I also think, as a secondary note, we all learn from history. There's flies that I stopped fishing years ago that I'm starting to incorporate back into my arsenal. I think that's huge. So we always, I mean, if you look at the Father Time and you look at, there's still people now that fish flies that are a couple hundred years old. And, we always try to put trout on a pedestal as to how smart they are, but that old stuff is still relevant now, and that's huge. I think you're going to see probably a push towards, as long as it's still available, people using natural materials again. It kind of goes in waves and cycles. We're all big on the synthetic market and all that stuff now, and it's great because we can engineer it, and there's still some materials that they can't replicate. Maybe in our lifetime we'll see good synthetic materials that replicate some of those naturals, but I think you're going to see a push towards more of those types of materials that give you specific actions, and you're going to start seeing a lot of old school stuff that you haven't seen a lot of starting to come back into resurface again, if that makes sense.